Expedition log of Vivi Messas, 20th of 2378. I believe I am finally strong enough to recount the events that took place on the night between the 16th and the 17th. After Greta Marie had told me the truth about herself and her secret group, I thought long and decided that it would only be fair for me to also tell her the truth about who I am. Thankfully, I was correct in my assumption that she would understand why I hid myself as I had, as it was for my protection. Also that she didn't care that I was actually a woman, though she did caution me to be more careful with Lilian. Of course I am being careful with her, but it isn't as easy as it may seem. The Countess is far more clever than she lets on, and many weaker than me would have already let down their armor around her. A few weeks ago I had developed a sort of scanner with which me and the Duke have been traveling around Illyria to map out the moon and its rot activity. And the evening before I visited the Countess, I had managed to pinpoint a spot of activity so heightened it scared me. When we'd come across it with the Duke, it hadn't appeared too different from other places we'd been, but seeing it on a map had been indisputably strange. All other rotting areas surrounded it, and the closer one got to that spot, the more spread out the rot was. I knew that going alone would be foolish, and quite likely could lead to my death, so I decided to ask Greta to come with me. I could have gone with the Duke, and maybe he would have taken some guards with us, but while I do trust him a lot now, I could not do with this. I fear that his impulse would have been to destroy everything before we got the chance to examine and study it. And while there was a small chance that he could have helped, I believe it is far more likely that the spot would have simply either been destroyed or accelerated its disastrous effects on Illyria. And so, while it was also dangerous for us to simply be two people, it was in my mind the safer option. Also, Greta Marie is a cyborg, so she would have her own tricks to make this trip easier. We took a ship from the older garages in Keaton Estate and drove to the spot, which took us almost 3 hours. There was nothing visible left of what had originally stood there, but we made our way underground, where the rot had begun. It was an old scientific research facility. I recognized it as such quickly, given that I've practically grown up in similar places. It was far less technologically advanced than the facilities back at the Triarchy, however, and also of a different design. I presume Arinonian, as no other people would have had access to Illyria. It felt something like a mirror world, seeing what was familiar yet very different than what I know. Everything was broken, including the elevator, running through the center of the facility, so we climbed down, examining each floor. In truth, we found nothing much of interest. Time had done harsh work upon the rooms and equipment. On the 7th floor, we encountered a long hallway, and each one of us took off in a different direction. If we hadn't been running out of time, we would have stayed together, but already we were getting far too close to the morning. I walked by myself for a long time, trying to focus despite how tired I was feeling. Everything was so green that I was worried I would forget about the different colors that exist in the universe. Until finally, something happened before me. The tunnel widened into a cave as I stepped in, slowly. I felt my feet dig deeper into the mossy ground. Each time I took a step, I had to yank my legs forward, the ground feeling as though it was sucking my boots inside of it. I've been trying to think of words to describe what the floor of that cave was like, and the best one I can think of is goopy. In the air hung small light particles. At first I thought they may have been some odd form of fireflies, although like everything else, their light was also green. I took a few with me, and now that I've had a closer look at them, I can tell that they're actually just more dead matter, though due to their lightness, able to float somewhat and glow. Here at the palace they simply float down slowly as the air is normal, but in the cave, where the air was heavy and stiff due to the rot, they stayed in the air, providing some illumination. Given how different everything in the cave appeared in comparison to the rest of the facility, I began to collect samples from various locations. I got some moss, some vines, the before mentioned fireflies, and had just got open a massive vine the size of a tree trunk, which caused sticky liquid to start dripping out when I heard footsteps. They were far too loud and stumpy to be Greta's, so I quickly nabbed a small amount of the liquid and stood up, surveying the cave. I didn't see it at first, as the cave was large and despite the small lights, quite dark, but when two glowing balls began to emerge from one distant corner, I did not hesitate. I began to run back, my instincts telling me it would be absolutely foolish to stay behind and try to get a closer look at whoever those eyes belonged to. Soon, I could hear a rumbling behind me, alongside those same footsteps which were speeding up. I have never before been chased like this, fearing for my life. In training, before I ever joined the Heart, we did learn to run in case of emergencies, proper breathing drilled into us trainees. I was never excellent, especially in comparison to Seb, but I was good enough to pass. At what I estimated to be 2/3 of the way back, I stumbled, however, my ankle twisting. My lungs were burning despite all the breathing practice, and I limped forward, but was forced to stop. From my thigh pocket, I pulled out a dagger, and I pressed myself against the wall, hoping to be at least slightly camouflaged as I turned off my torch. The creature that had been chasing me soon caught up, though it had slowed down. It passed by me, sniffing the air. Then I did perhaps one of the most foolish things I have ever done before. I sprang from the wall and slammed my dagger into the back of the beast, which roared and stumbled backwards. Refusing to let go of my dagger, I dragged it down, causing a wound, the flesh beneath the skin disgusting. Taking advantage of the creature's pain and confusion, I began to run again. From one of my front pockets, I took out a painkiller, and as quickly as I could, I opened and then closed my helmet so that I could eat it. It worked as quickly as always, and I was able to speed up once more, despite my foot and the dizziness I was feeling. Close to the elevator, I caught sight of Greta Marie, and tried to wave my hands in a way that signaled, "Get out of here now." It worked, thank the stars. We got up, mainly because the creature was unable to get into the elevator due to its horns. On the surface, once more, we made haste to get back to town. Vivi's personal log. After the 3-hour drive, I already could tell that something was wrong with me, more than a twisted ankle. I gave some of my findings to Greta Marie and left for the palace. However, I only made it to the hill before darkness clouded my vision and I fell to the ground. I woke up a few hours after, in the hospital wing of the palace, with the Duke staring intensely into my face. This frightened me significantly, and before I could even speak, he rushed to tell me what had happened. While doing his morning rounds, Valentine had found me lying on the grounds of the palace, pale and slightly green. With the help of other servants, he had dragged me inside, informed the Duke, and called for a doctor from town. Since then I had been inspected, and the doctor had declared that I was clearly infected due to the rot. After that, the Duke had forbidden anyone else from entering my room here, and had been personally overseeing me. Once my hazy vision finally focused, I realized that he was wearing a quarantine mask. For a moment we stayed in silence as I took in what had happened. Then Orson spoke again, his voice softer. He told me that during this inspection, they had also realized that I was clearly not a man, or at least did not have a man's body. Perhaps it was my exhaustion or pain or the drugs that had been administered to me, but I could not stop myself from admitting everything to him. I feared anger, disappointment, and hurt from the Duke, but instead he burst out laughing. When I demanded to know why, he tried to calm himself. Then he comforted me, explaining that he wouldn't throw me out and would indeed help me stay hidden should I want to do so. Apparently, my help to him has been too important for him to now feel betrayed by the fact that I am actually a woman. I told him that I was relieved and that I would continue to pose as a man, as otherwise our operation at Keaton Estate would be impossible. Only then did Orson appear to recall Keaton, or the Countess. Then I gave him the instructions to help heal me, or what I hoped would do so. The last time I'd been with the Countess, she'd given me a special vial of love knot elixir, one developed by her brother to hopefully work as a cure one day. Using some of that and other substances that I had myself been developing, and with my guide, Orson stayed with me and helped me heal. After suffering for 2 nights and 2 days, the cure finally appeared to take effect. Since this morning I have been feeling nearly normal, though there's still discoloring to my skin and I get bouts of dizziness. Despite this, I have decided to go to Keaton again tomorrow, as I need to get more love knot and see Greta Marie again. Soon this will all come to an end. I can feel it now. I only hope that it will be a good and happy one. Vivi's personal log, 21st of 2378. Today has been so long, and I have so much to process. The best way to do so, in my opinion, will be here. I shall recount everything as well as I can remember, and hopefully that shall clear my mind somewhat. After breakfast with Orson in the morning, a situation now so normal to me and everyone else at the palace that even Valentine didn't frown while it was happening, I took off towards Keaton Estate. I offered to walk, as I knew that the Duke would need most, if not all, of his ships today, but given my recent illness, he insisted that I take one anyway. I am grateful for this, as while I feel significantly better than I did, I still have some way to go until I am completely normal. Me and the Duke have also decided not to tell the Countess what I had been up to, at least not yet. I have also decided not to let Orson know about Greta Marie's involvement, as I see no reason to endanger the girl, even if the Duke might be lenient. Hopefully soon we'll be able to be more open between all of us, especially with Lilian, whom I feel bad for given her state of ignorance in much of this. She has not pushed for too much information, however, during the times we've been working on the Love Not Vine. I suspect that she finds it a relieving hobby to help me and act as my assistant, as for once she doesn't have to take responsibility over everything. Rather, she only has to do the simple tasks I give her. Maybe that was what her life had been like back when her brother was alive, given that he had been master of the estate instead of her. She has talked about him a bit more during our meetings, mainly recalling the happiness of their childhood when her parents were also still alive. They frequently went back to Arinan, where Lilian had many friends and places she loved to go. She has told me what she misses, the fresh air, and how one can walk around without having to wear any special suits or helmets. There was also horse riding, large libraries, and wonderful tea shops. All of this is missing in Illyria, but she cannot go back. I asked her one time if it would be so bad to leave the estate to her uncle and go back to try and make a life there, but she looked mad enough to whack me across the head. This is still her home, and this is where her family lived and died, and she has to save it from the greedy claws of Sir Tobias. I apologized, and though she was glum for some time, she eventually brightened up once more, seemingly having forgiven me. I do enjoy bringing her true emotions to the surface, not only for her sake, as it cannot be good to keep everything bottled and always be pretending to be something else, but also as she looks rather funny when angered or flustered. Her entire face becomes bright red, and she has a habit of rolling her eyes dramatically. When I arrived today, she was in an excellent mood, apparently having also suffered some headaches recently, but having healed. As usual, we went into the Locknot green room and took off from where we left off. We've been experimenting with the original elixir's recipe to try and get it to be more potent. The notes of Lilian's brother Will have been useful, but not enough so far. I am almost certain that we don't have all of them, and while Lilian insists that we have all that she has, I suspect that he has hidden some more on the estate. The next time I have a moment to talk to Greta Marie, I will ask her to have a look, as I myself will be unlikely to get the chance to do so. I saw the girl when I entered, and she gave me a meaningful stare before we closed the doors. Since our trip, we haven't been able to talk, and I would also want to reassure her that I am all right. Of course, she would have realized that me having to delay this date had to do with where we'd gone. I have been keeping my dagger locked tightly in the laboratory wing of the palace, though I have not yet had the chance to inspect it. Perhaps tomorrow, if I get enough rest tonight. After a few hours in the greenhouse, Lilian yawned loudly and claimed that another headache was forming. I asked her if she would prefer to go rest while I continued to work, but she declined this. Instead, she asked whether I would like to go for a walk in town. I was of course surprised, as Lilian has told me several times before that she avoids leaving Keaton Estate. Not only does she feel safe here, but she dislikes having to put on the required suit to go out. Still, we ended up doing so, with Greta Marie following behind us just in case. I actually hadn't really had the chance to see the town that much, despite my time here, and Lilian pointed out that interesting spots, buildings, and shops to me. She visited her seamstress, who usually delivers new dresses to Keaton Estate directly. We also entered one of the 3 bakeries in town and got some delicious and freshly baked pastries. Then we got to the public park, which had a surprising amount of people walking around, all in suits. We even saw a few dogs outfitted in their own safety suits. It was in the park, however, where everything went wrong. Out of nowhere appeared Sir Andreas and Sir Tobias, much to the disappointment of both Lilian and me. I have come to dislike both during my visits, and the feelings were clearly mutual. Even more surprising was when Sir Andreas unsheathed a sword, a very old-looking one, and challenged me to a duel over Lilian's hand. I believe that in my shock I stammered something unintelligible, and Lilian tried to stop Sir Andreas, but he ignored her. Sir Tobias approached me and handed me a sword as well, patting me on the shoulder. He said something along the lines of, "This is the honorable way to resolve this squabble," though I hadn't even been aware there was some squabble between us. Lilian was screeching that she had never promised herself to Sir Andreas, and Greta Marie was holding her back with a furious look in her eyes. I tried to clear my head a bit and push back the flush that had risen on my face, explaining to Sir Andreas that I was still working for the Duke, trying to get Lilian to accept his suit, not mine. Sir Andreas rebuked this and bid me take the starting position. I did not even know what he meant before he was barreling towards me. At the last moment, I managed to duck away, and due to his momentum, Sir Andreas kept going several steps past me. People had begun gathering around us in the park, cheering either one of us on. I was horribly nervous, having never been in a duel before. Sir Tobias was hollering at Andreas to spear me through my chest. I tried to center myself as we clumsily exchanged for a few more blows before a sudden figure rushed in front of me. They were tall and cloaked, and despite not having a weapon themselves, they blocked Sir Andreas' next blows with their arms. With a quick kick to the stomach, they knocked Andreas to the floor, and my opponent lost his sword. My defender snatched it and turned to me, offering a hand so that I could rise to my feet. Shouts were getting closer to us, but I was struck by the man before me. His face was scruffy, with several scars and a cropped beard. He was staring at me with immense concern, far too much considering that I was a stranger to him. When asking me if I was all right, his voice was equally worried, and he pressed a hand to my shoulder. Lilian also came to me, thanking the stranger for aiding me. Greta Marie stayed behind, observing everything with curious eyes. And then the shouting people, guards working for the Duke, I realized, had arrived and were speaking brusquely to the man. Seeing the Countess and also me, who they recognized for having been at the palace for quite a while now, they bowed lightly and tried to drag the man away. Despite his protests, they were explaining to Lilian and I that the man was a criminal who had been missing for 7 years. Lilian let out a rather loud and shocked "Oh!" and grabbed my hand, pulling me away from the man who had kept staring at me the entire time. When he broke his silence, it was only to state that he wanted to defend me from whoever was attacking, and that he was confused as to how I knew anyone here. Befuddled, I asked the man what he was talking about, but the guards insisted that he had to be taken to the palace. Everyone was speaking at once, Lilian asking me if I knew this criminal and how I could not have told her, if it was all a misunderstanding. The guards trying to get everyone else in the park to be calm while also reattaching handcuffs to the man's hands. Me still aching a bit from the fight, but mainly doing my best to comprehend how this man knew me and how he felt so strongly about me as to try and shield me. And this man, West as the guards were calling him, his expression slowly changing from bewildered to hurt. In a loud voice, he interrupted everyone, stating that he would go with the guards and that he only had one request for me. After getting an annoyed yes from the guards, West looked at me and asked me to give him his money. By this point, my mind was scrambling to make sense of my reality. I felt as though I had been dropped into the middle of a book where I had never learned who the characters were and who they knew and what relationships they had, or even what the world was like. I stammered that I had no idea what he was talking about, and now in an angrier tone, West insisted that I return what I had borrowed. Even the guards looked at me in surprise, but it was Lilian who sort of solved the issue. With a wave of her hand, she coldly said that perhaps this criminal had tried to cheat me out of money before or something, and that I should ignore him. Given the Countess's high status, this was enough for the guards, who began to drag West away. As they did so, West still turned to look back at me several times, and the moment before he was stuffed into a guardship, he called out something that made my blood freeze in my veins. His words still echo in my head now. "I trusted you, Seb. 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 Seb? How? How could he know that name, know what it meant to me? Apparently, the moment I heard it, I turned very pale, and Lilian rushed us both back to Keaton. For a few hours, I allowed her to try and cheer me back up with tea and pastries and her angry rants about how dare some scum of the moon get close to me. She also quizzed me about my knowledge of the man, despite my state, and I insisted to her that I had never before seen him in my life. After telling her this 3 or 4 times, she appeared satisfied, and eventually she ran out of anger and began to talk of other things, of the love not buying and our work, and also how soon spring would be arriving in Aranon and how that was always her favorite season there. My brain was too busy, overworking, trying to understand all that had happened, so I ended up tuning out most of Lilian's ramblings. I hadn't even realized how late it had gotten until Greta Marie cleared her throat, stating that it was nearly time for the Countess's supper. She shouldn't have said that, however, as I had to then spend nearly half an hour convincing Lilian that I could not stay as I needed to go back, as the Duke waited for me. I left finally, and did indeed have dinner with the Duke, who of course had heard of the ordeal with the criminal from his own guards. Due to his excessive quizzing of all that had happened and needing to know if I was well, our food turned cold before we got to eat it. Utterly exhausted, I crawled to my chambers, and here I have been walking in circles and speaking to myself, trying to make sense of today. During dinner, an idea had begun forming in my mind, caused by the Duke actually. He had given me a quick rundown of this criminal's, full name Anton West, history. 7 years ago, he and his entire family had been arrested due to a group robbery, and while everyone else had been caught, the man couldn't have been in Aranon either, as he had been charged as a criminal there as well. Perhaps he left somewhere far and had now returned to try and get justice. Or, as a joke, the Duke wondered if he had stayed close by, clinging to some rubble in space. He had laughed at himself and the ridiculousness of his idea, but it stopped me in my tracks. There were many ways to live in rubble. Spaceships turned into long-term habitation, pieces broken off from planets, satellites. Most of these would stay near the bigger planet and its center of gravity. If Anton had been hiding out like this, near Illyria but not quite, then there was a chance. While my half of the escape pod drifted far, there is a chance that Sebs had followed in a similar direction. And if this man, West, was all alone and stuck in rubble, he wouldn't have been opposed to a companion, especially one who had never heard of his criminal background. I need to go talk to this man, straight away.